Welcome to the Four Visions Market Podcast, a space built on the principles of integrity and reciprocity. Together, we will engage in thought-provoking conversations about plant medicines, why these plants are coming out of the rainforests, jungles, and mountains after thousands of years, and what it means to be in right relationship with the ancestral wisdom cultures and guardians of these traditions. I'm your host, Mariah Ganessa, founder and director of Four Visions Market. This podcast is the natural evolution in our commitment to providing you, our tribe, with incredible resources to support you on your healing journey through plant medicines. Welcome home. Welcome back, Four Visions Tribe, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Four Visions podcast. Today on the show, we welcome Keith Parker and Christabel Armsden, co-founders of Field Dynamics. Field Dynamics was founded in 2018 with the intention of creating a contemporary energy healing modality and increasing the awareness of energy healing as a universal and accessible practice. They offer professional trainings ranging from foundations to an in-depth 200-hour practitioner certification route, as well as destination-based retreats and one-on-one energy healing sessions. Keith is a teacher, author, and healing practitioner with expertise in the human energy field. He has extensive studies in contemplative science and the healing arts, including movement, breathwork, bodywork, energy work, and other disciplines. His first book, due to be published in 2024, is an exploration of how the human aura informs our understanding of mind-body connection, consciousness, and reality itself. Innately sensitive to energetic exchange since childhood, Christabel is a committed teacher and healing practitioner, particularly skilled in how we can better understand and incorporate energetic awareness in our relational dynamics, emotions, and communication. An exceptional space holder, she has studied multiple healing modalities over the decades, including various forms of energy work, body work, and meditation practices. Both Keith and Christabel believe that personal healing is the foundation for collective change and are committed to disseminating the ancient practice of energy healing in the world of modern wellness. Welcome, welcome. It is a pleasure to be together. Thank you so much for coming on our show. And I'm really excited to get into this beautiful topic of energy healing and energy today. And so thank you and welcome. I'd like to start by hearing and giving you both the opportunity to share a little bit about what catalyzed your healing journeys personally and what brought you to this path and the work that you are doing together today in Field Dynamics. So whichever one of you feel called to share first.
I, like many people, led a particular kind of life based in my own cultural familial conditioning. I got involved in music in particular, and I was living a pretty nice life in New York, working as an audio engineer, music producer, musician, etc. And after many years of that, about a decade of it, I found that somehow my life I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't content. And so I started on that inner journey. I kind of put everything down and went within, and particularly through meditation and yoga and breath work. And then that led me into healing modalities. I found a different path, if you will. And where that all led me ultimately was to energy work and specializing in working with the human energy field. That's really where I have a certain acuity through vision and sensing it in a particular way. And when I met Christabel, when we met each other, we realized we had a great opportunity to do something wonderful together that we didn't really see being realized anywhere else at the moment.
Thanks, Mariah, for having us here today. Very excited to be here with the Four Visions audience. So it always fascinates me how for Keith and myself, we often represent a sort of polarity or a union of different ideas and places. And for my background, actually, it was relatively alternative. I actually grew up in a very conventional family, but there were alternative interests. So both my parents were professionals, and they also pursued and had interest in what would be called maybe the alternative sector. So we attended sort of peace festivals when I was younger. There was a lot of interest in the Whole Foods movement by sort of Rose Elliott. And there was a lineage of mediumistic and psychic capacity and healing capacity on both, primarily the maternal lineage, but also a little in the paternal, as I found out recently. So I had this sort of background. So I grew up going to sort of crystal shops as well as doing all the sort of more conventional things in education, but it was something that stayed in the background. And I was sort of fully pulled in to a somewhat materialistic lifestyle, professional career, all that sort of expected route, I guess. But I also suffered from a lot of depression, a lot of challenges cyclically, despite outward success. And that used to sort of come up and arise in me periodically. It was quite challenging. And I reached a sort of culmination at a certain point, and I turned inward and recognized that this sort of conflict I was living between where I thought I was going and what I thought would make me happy was actually not working out. And it took that real low point to sort of say, okay, what would happen? What might happen if I gave up some of this materialism, some of these things that I thought was everything I wanted? And so that was when I really full-time committed to all the things I'd sort of explored and had in the background in those years.
Beautiful. And so both of your journeys with energy healing, is that something that you started exploring together once you met one another, or did you already have passion and interest individually and then found each other through this mutual study and commitment?
We both had varying types of experiences with that kind of work before we had met one another. As Christabel mentioned, she grew up with it in one way or another, and I had spent some years working with it specifically through certain modality trainings, etc. And we met at a workshop actually in London, like a kind of an energy healing workshop, if you will. And when we met, we just had a special spark and knew there was real opportunity there.
Yeah, I had the background with the energy healing in the family line. I grew up with Barbara Brennan's Healing Hands of Light on the bookshelf. So it was there, but it was sort of off to the side. Yeah, it took coming together and that connection with Keith to say, okay, yeah, I know all about this actually. And how can we maybe dive deeper and explore it together and do something different with this in a contemporary context? Yeah.
I have a lot of admiration for any couple that can come together and share in a mutual vision of service and commitment to the world, and especially as it pertains to healing. It's a really beautiful thing to find your partner in this life and then, be able to generate this energy of love and union in a creative expression. And it's a very beautiful thing when that works and that is harmonious. Could you share a little bit about how the vision for Field Dynamics came to be, as well as give our listeners a little bit of context for what Field Dynamics is and what you both do together?
Energy healing is a really amorphous term to a lot of people. If you were to Google something like energy healing, you might see that like crystal bowls are energy healing, and mantras are energy healing, and even like EFT can be energy healing. Like there's all these different things that can be under that subheading. But there's this kind of more classical version of it, which is exemplified by something like Reiki, where you're really tapping into the source of consciousness, or you're tapping into higher consciousness, or you're working exclusively in the field. You're not starting with physical means. You're working through the aura first, if you will, and from that connection into spirit, if you will. And that healing art form, which is quite ancient, but it has some, modern guises, is really, really not well understood. The mechanism's not well understood. The practice isn't well understood. The teachings are not well understood. And we started Field Dynamics because we said the potency of this kind of practice is not only astounding and profound, but it's also not being offered in general in the marketplace, and it's not being explained in general in the mainstream conversation about it in a way that can be communicated comfortably at a dinner table, can be communicated comfortably in simple text in a paragraph or two can be communicated comfortably to a scientist, to a person who's skeptical of these kinds of practices. That's one of the big pillars of field dynamics is modernizing it, making it contemporary, bringing it into a mode of understanding and dialogue that isn't woo-woo, but is really grounded, really coherent. So that's one big piece. And then the other one is about the breadth and depth of what you can do with this modality or approach to healing once you understand it more and more. And again, a lot of the things we see out there are pre-recorded courses. They're 1 day, they're 2 days. We said, well, what is it that we've experienced when we've gone through our own, studies, our own learning, our own transformational process? We see 6 months, a year, 2 years, where you study something, you learn its depth, you receive the benefits of it, and you integrate that knowledge over time, and you can achieve real levels of, going from a beginner to an intermediate, maybe becoming more advanced, maybe coming to levels of mastery or virtuosity, right? The healing arts are artistic and they're also technical. And so we wanted to create a program that enabled people to really deep dive into this art form in a way that we didn't see in general out there, so that people could be held, people could integrate it, people could be educated and experience what this can be when you really start to tease it out and see what the potentials are.
It's interesting. We chatted last week, Mariah, when you guested on our podcast, about how incredible it was that the complex recipe, if you will, for yahe, ayahuasca, was replicated in the most part across multiple indigenous cultures, right? Far apart in geographical context. It's pretty unbelievable. So in the same vein, as we look at the major indigenous sort of medical systems separated by thousands of miles as well, that independently devised healing approaches based on the body as an energy field. So we have qi and the meridians in TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. We have prana and the doshas in Ayurveda. We have chakras and the nadis, maybe in the Vedic texts. And this idea that health and healing can come from manipulating the flow of energy that's traveling through the body and field. And specific points and balances can be made in the electromagnetic field that surround the body. So I think that part of what field dynamics is really hoping to achieve, and we are achieving, we'll hopefully continue to achieve, is bringing a kind of culmination point and sort of saying that Keith and I are avid researchers and we've studied lots of different modalities, that there's all these similarities and commonalities across these disciplines. And how is it that we can bring a contemporary language, a contemporary understanding to that and start to bring a universalized sort of non-dogmatic approach to it so that people can really realize huge benefits available and what it is that can be achieved with these healing tools, with this toolkit of the energy healer, and working consciously with the field, with the human aura, which isn't just about energy healing in that traditional sense of running frequencies and pulling energy in, but is also about skillful knowledge and understanding of what's happening within the field in energetic communication and exchange with our intimate partners, in our family context, in the fields of countries and cultures, that micro to macro scale.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I love that explanation, and kind of has me wanting to go into a little bit more of an overview of how our awareness of energy can support us in living a more balanced life, and what some of the studies that you offer and embody through your practice, how it can be applied in a daily practice. So maybe you could share a little bit about that and how you see these modalities integrating into both the spiritual practice as well as a greater embodiment in our physical beings, and a greater awareness and consciousness of how we walk through our daily lives.
So many of the people who come to us to train with us are often looking to be in service. They've reached that time in their lives when whatever they've been doing isn't working, or they're a little bit further on the path and they recognize that a while ago, and they've been establishing, maybe they're yogis, maybe they've trained in some shamanic tools, they're maybe exploring different contexts for support. And they're finding that they're interested in working with maybe other people as well. So we have that intention of being in service. We also have that parallel thread of wanting to continue to pursue their own healing journey. How is it they continue to work with what's holding them back, limiting beliefs, blocks, patterns of behavior, ancestral work, and so on and so forth. And so what interests me about it is I think that there's this balance between what happens on the mat, as we say, to use a meditation term, in our formal practice, our formal energy healing practice, where Keith and I are sort of showing people how it is they can work with higher consciousness to bring in frequencies, to bring balance and harmony to the field, right? Mm-hmm. How they can apply that externally in working with others. But then we have this beautiful piece, and this is what I'm very passionate about, is as we're bringing more and more awareness to this field and this energetic exchange, what's going on between people when we're not on that formal practice in the mat? What's happening in our fields and our minds and our bodies in a holistic sense when we're just going about our day-to-day existence, when we're in partnership, in intimate relations, when we're connecting to our family members, our parents, our siblings, when we're in the workplace, when we're liaising with colleagues, or in the supermarket at the checkout, and what's happening there. So we're bringing greater awareness to the fact that there is this language of the energy field. There is a constant and continuous energetic exchange happening. It's all energy, as we say, right? So as people refine that skill of tracking, and Keith can talk more to this, but as people refine that skill of moving through their system, mapping the topography of their inner landscape and their field through the structure of the subtle anatomy, the chakras, the central channel, they're starting to really tune into their ESP, their extrasensory perception. And as they do this, they're like, oh my God, okay, hang on. What's mine that I'm feeling? My thoughts, my vibrations, my blocks, right? My triggers, my emotions, my discomfort. And what's somebody else's, right? And this happens in terms of working with someone else in the context of a partner exchange, giving an energy healing session or receiving. But they also start to say, well, hang on, I have this sensation when I'm interacting with my father. I have this sort of sensation or this experience in my system when I'm in a heated debate with my intimate partner, right? And so we start to get this peaceful marriage between the two. Mm-hmm. And that's what comes to mind for me in this moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some crucial language I just want to, bring in is being able to describe what your field is made of, because this is some of the points of clarity that we think are really important to be able to have these discussions more like above board. Like, for example, mainstream science focuses on the material world, and materialism, right, is about the belief that everything is just matter. But we understand that there are things that exist that are not material, and a really straightforward version of that is that an electromagnetic field is not material. It's literally not matter. And that's what your energy field is comprised of. It's an electromagnetic thing. And electromagnetism is the phenomena of light. It's also the thing which, when you get really tongue twisty about it or mind twisty about it, is it's also what underlies time and space itself. Time and space is in relationship to the phenomena of electromagnetism or light. So when we see all these different spiritual traditions talking about the importance of light, or the light and the dark, or the void and the dark, these cosmology stories, they are tracking back and describing the structure of the human being and the psyche and the relationship between the body and the mind. And in particular, when we're talking about the field, we're getting into this phenomena of electromagnetism. So your field is an electromagnetic thing, and your body's a material thing. And that means that they don't work in the same way. They don't conform to the same behavior, the same physics. And that's a really, really key thing. And that's not where science is looking so much, but it is where it's knocking on the door of these kinds of things. There are plenty of breadcrumbs that are leading cutting edge science further into this direction, inevitably, as they investigate reality more deeply. But nonetheless, your field is, simply put, an electromagnetic thing more than anything else. And that means it's not material. And we have to start considering, what does it mean if we do have an energy body and a physical body? And how are they different? How do they function differently? And then what's contained in that energy body? And this is not the first time that anybody necessarily will have said this, but some people will hear this for the first time. Your field is an outlay of your thoughts, of basically the contents of your mind. When you think, every thought has a form in your field. And so thoughts are things, thoughts are forms, thoughts are objects, actually. But it's not a physical object. It's an electromagnetic object. It's a higher dimensional, multidimensional object, which is confusing, but nonetheless, that's what is going on. And it's perceivable. You can perceive that. I can see this really clearly. A lot of people historically have been able to see this really clearly. They depict it in different ways, they language it in different ways. But what our energy field is fundamentally is the representation or the projection or the structure of what it is was happening mentally, psychologically. And so when we talk about, meditation is a quelling of the mind, a settling of the mind, but in a certain sense, it's a development of the field. And so energy healing takes this field development that meditation sets as its primary and starts to create a much more accelerated and rapid transformational process in that domain. Essentially, getting more energetically intelligent or field intelligent is when you start to be more strategic and skillful about what is happening in that domain. How do you tend to your thoughts? How do you tend to your emotions? And whereas we might just do meditation and start to become more aware, where energy healing starts to bring in these other skills is we start to actually get used to the texture, the tonality, the perception, the structures of thoughts, of emotions, and how they connect to other people, how they're circulating within our own system, so that we have this language where we can not only speak about the content, like I'm anxious, I'm happy, I feel imbalanced, etc., but to start also looking at the other side of that, saying, it's happening over here. I can feel the texture pressing up against this area in my system. I can sense the density of the blockage of that feeling of anxiety in this area in my field, and I can bring more attention to it, and I can even potentially bring in tools to start to change it. So that's an important thing to kind of lay the groundwork, I think, is having a language about what our energy fields are, and then it really opens up this wonderful world of curiosity and kind of wonder as well, because this is fun. It is very fun. However it is you get a handle on getting into the energy field, it's a whole world unto itself, and just offers a lot of possibilities in terms of our self-understanding.
Thank you for that. That's a beautiful explanation. And yeah, our last conversation that we had, which I think I'll share the link to that episode in the show notes for this one, where I was on Christabel and Keith's podcast. But we were talking a lot about the intersectionality of the shamanic realms and the indigenous healing cultures and the energy field dynamics. And there are so many beautiful parallels and weavings. And it's a really wonderful thing to put different vocabulary to something, especially if we already have a context for it in another way, because I do really believe that in order to embody something, depending on, how we learn and our learning styles, we need different ways to experience something to be able to really bring it in and understand how it pertains and how we most digest that information within our own being. So especially, talking about thought and energy, most people who work with plant medicines already have that understanding, and whether they have gone through their own investigations of energy healing or they've experienced it when they go to work with the plants, because what the plants do is they bring us instantly into that place of subtlety. And as you kind of have both been alluding to, this subtle energy is important to be able to access these places of energetic awareness and the energetic field. Without that sensitivity, it's really difficult. There's too much noise in both the mind and the thoughts, as well as the physical and emotional and energetic spiritual bodies, to be able to penetrate into the subtleties of what happens in the field. And so I'm very curious, we were talking about how you both have a practice with plants and that you've had experience with plant medicines and visionary plants. And I would love to learn a little bit more about how your work with the plants has affected your understanding of energy, as well as how you bring your studies of energy work to when you practice and commune with plant medicine.
When I really started to do meditation work about 13, 14 years ago, actually, yeah, about 14 years ago, I really divorced myself from all. I went into a very, let's say, ascetic yogi inspired life. So I kind of became more of like an ascetic, a renunciate. I left everything that I was familiar with before. And I really spent the first 5 years or so just being very into meditation, breath work, a lot of asana, a lot of time in India and things like that. And plant medicine, working with any kind of shamanic traditions, power plants were very off of my radar. I just didn't have resonance. There was no attraction. And once I started studying healing modalities, and I kind of started to get back into the world about 2 years into studying healing work, I came across an experience of like an intense breathwork course. And what happened in it, which was a very like more like a hyperventilation almost, like controlled hyperventilation approach, where you breathe a lot, like intensely, rapidly for a long time. And what I noticed was that after a little while, I started having tremendous amount of energy start circulating through my body. And I was really like, wow, this is very simple to access this. And a little light bulb went off in my head. And it was simply that all of the things that were producing the most catalyst, the most change as I was studying, all of them had to do with accessing the subconscious. That was the commonality. It was, how do you cross the threshold into the stuff you really don't know? Okay. And so that sparked an interest in saying, well, what really gets extreme and getting into places I don't know? What grants really serious access in a way that is intense and really all the way in. So this little light bulb led me to shine a light on ayahuasca and going down to South America. And what I did is I found a center in Ecuador and went down for a couple of weeks and just participated in a number of different ceremonies. And it was the first time that I had ever worked with any of these medicines. It was ayahuasca and San Pedro, and the experience was incredibly rewarding. You Mariah, described that there was the four visions. One of the visions was the most potentially profound of all of them, which is the return to source. And I had that in my first experience, and it was definitely very, very transformative. And so all the preparation I had done with meditation for all of those years, and I mean like a lot of meditation work, really laid a wonderful foundation for being able to synergize with the plant medicine. It prepared me to be able to be mindful and stable and balanced with what the medicine was showing me. And it certainly allowed me to have greater access than without it. So I found that experience was tremendously helpful for me on my journey and really created definitely a pivot point in terms of before and after, for sure. And yet at the same time, I also reflected on it and I had no interest in going back into that. So for me, I was like, I don't know if that will be the only time in my life I'll ever do that ever again. That was my feeling about it. And I did maintain it in that way until about a year ago, just a little bit of working with a shaman again in South America after about an 8-year period of not. And it was useful, but it was very different. I don't think it offered the same potency that the original experiences were. So I think that, and I've heard other teachers say this as well, I do think that for me, my grounding was in traditional meditation, asana. I'd say meditation more than anything else, right? Just really simple meditation and really getting far in that world. And for me, I felt a real resonance to and pull into the plant medicine. I trusted that intuition, and it really synergized extremely well for me. And I feel like that is a real option for people to see that using different things that resonate with them, that are calling them at the time, can produce wonderful results. It's not a one-way path for anybody. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And so that was my journey with it in general. That at least is the big experience that I wanted to share.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, I really believe that plant medicine is very much applicable to many people, but that doesn't mean that it has the same relationship with everyone on their healing journey. Some people come to it once, and that's enough to go out into those realms of consciousness and bring the information that they need to catalyze their spiritual journey, as well as people find plant medicine at very different stages in their journey. So for you, having that rooted experience already in meditation and spiritual practice, you, like you said, were already very grounded in who you were and your sense of self going into that experience, which I believe to be, a great blessing and ultimately in a lot of ways the ideal scenario to experience plant medicine. Because when we go to those realms and we don't have a context of a embodied practice that can help us anchor and really integrate and bring forth all the information that we experience by journeying to those other realms, oftentimes people find themselves lost in the process of the months and years that follow because there's no point of reference. And so it can be like that. It could also be that plant medicine be that catalyst that really opens someone up to all the different spiritual practices. And then it's through plant medicine that they find a connection with meditation or breath work or prayer. And they don't go back to the plant medicine even, but that really starts them on their journey to other forms of self-inquiry. So there's so many different roads and pathways that we can take. But in my own experience, witnessing people who have no reference point versus someone who already has a stable spiritual practice, I just see that the gems that we can uncover through a shamanic inquiry practice with visionary plants tends to be just so much more accessible and comprehensible for people. And so that's a beautiful journey. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm very curious to hear more about Christabel's journey as well.
My instincts when I think of plant medicine initially don't even go to those more explosive ceremonial experiences I've had with shamanistic practices. I can come to those, but I go immediately to homeopathy and vibrational essences. That was where I had my first interactions with working with plants in a healing way. And I'm going back to being quite young. And being relatively energetically sensitive from a young age, I was sort of mind blown with the dynamic that could be established with just purely the vibrational aspect of a plant. Through remedies like back remedies and homeopathic remedies, because my parents introduced me to homeopathy when I was quite young as well. So I think for me, it was a very sort of fine vibrational attunement to plants initially, and herbs as well, because we used a lot of herbs in terms of, rather than pharmaceuticals where possible, we use a lot of herbal medicines. So my engagement with plants as a healing mechanism was really quite subtle. And it took me a while to move into the territories. It was later in my spiritual development of sort of ingesting or working with plants in a more shamanistic sense. And it started with Kambo. And I was amazed because we're talking here, Maria, you asked about the parallels between energy healing. And for me, I was already had a very established energy healing practice at that point. And the Kambo was this incredible, it was a really wonderful experience. It was watching the medicine through the inner landscape travel and traverse the system to find that which was holding me back. And that was my intention for that ceremony. Like, please help me establish and see and hold what's holding me back in this life. And it was, luckily, having developed good scanning and tracking sensibilities through my energy healing practice, I was able to follow the journey of that medicine. And that's, in fairness, Kambo obviously being coming from the frog. It's an animal medicine in that sense, but I incorporate it here because it feels relevant. And moving into ayahuasca at a later date, it was very similar. I was able to, whilst at times I was taken away very much into alternate realms and realities, I was able to keep returning. The ayahuasca enabled me to keep returning to my body and to be able to feel and work through things in my body and field, my aura. And I would literally see, very similar to an energy healing practice, I could see the content, the information of the block, of what was being worked with. And it might be taking into a memory space. It might be symbolic imagery. It might be an emotion that needed purging almost immediately. But it was very parallel in a more intense fashion to an energy healing session. And that was a really beautiful revelation for me as somebody who'd shied away from using medicines in that sense because of my understanding of more conventional hallucinogens, etc., which was sort of disempowering to me because I didn't want to be out of it because I felt so much. And I was able to wait and do an ayahuasca experience when I was ready, and it called to me. And I was able to follow that tracking. So that was really beautiful. San Pedro was something that was quite overwhelming for me in my experience of it. I haven't as yet returned to it because I felt like it was a really full field connection. If somebody in the circle we were sitting in experienced pain, trauma, anger, I could feel and see and experience that resonate through the entire field of everybody sitting there. So it was a real amplifier of the field. And as somebody who already has quite an amplified field engagement, I was like, woo, this is a lot. But it was very educational as well. And I felt like my journey with the San Pedro was to really see that. And the challenge was to stay in my center regardless. And to be able to watch and feel and allow that and be okay with this idea that if one person in my field, my group field, is experiencing anger, I don't need to take that on, in fact. And that's been a big learning for me. I can feel how it resonates in my system and it can talk to my anger, but I don't need to jump over there and say, I've got your anger, it's okay, I'm with you, right? And this was my childhood patterning. Like, I'll feel what you feel because that's love. Yeah, so that's what comes to mind for me. But it's interesting because I think Hank Wesselman, who taught at Omega and Esalen amongst others, spoke of how really the shaman and the energy healer, there's a lot of parallels because they're both walking the dimensions. They're both learning to walk the planes in order to disseminate information and content in the various nested energy bodies, whether you call it the astral or whatnot, in order to bring our understanding to information that's held outside of time or space in that traditional linear sense and to facilitate healing. So,
That's beautiful. I love that. Taking a short break from today's episode to share about an incredible product line that we absolutely love. It's called Clarea, which means clarity and illumination. Clarea was created from divine inspiration and guidance that our coherence of body, mind, and soul are born from inner clarity. These creations are alchemized with the intention to bring forth health and well-being to the totality of your temple to nourish a vital, thriving life. Holistically handcrafted with love and care for your well-being of mind, body, and soul. An offering that is life-giving, relevant, and aligned for all life and the future generations to come. Clarea is formulated from over 33 years of the founders' combined in-depth, dedicated study, research, application, and experience with holistic health, Ayurveda, herbalism, permaculture, detoxification methodology, and healing. Everything is 100% organic or wild-crafted, biodynamic, homegrown, vegan, botanical, pure, all ingredients of the purest, highest grade, sourced ethically and sustainably. Clarea is a full-circle sustainable project that aims to create as big as an impact for our Mother Earth and all life as possible. We are 100% aligned on every level with this beautiful company's mission, and for that reason, we felt called to share this incredible product line with you, our Four Visions family. 10% of all proceeds go directly to nonprofit organizations aimed at environmental regeneration and restorative efforts, specifically for water cleanup, protection and preservation of the waters, restoration of bee populations, protection of indigenous sacred lands, rights, and natural resources, reforestation, and endangered species and animal rights. Check out the link in the show notes and make sure to use the code FVFamily to snag some savings on your order. And now back to today's episode. Yeah, it's great hearing about these experiences and how you've woven it into your own practices. I've kind of been thinking throughout this conversation of how our listeners might, utilize the study of energy practices to support them in their spiritual practice, knowing that most of our listeners' spiritual practice includes work with plant medicines, and not just visionary plants, right? But also plant allies and healing lotions and herbs and plant baths and the hape and the sananga, which we spoke about on our last conversation. Many of the people that come to us, they find these tools as their first entryway into both spirituality and plant medicine. So some of them are in rural areas throughout the United States and don't have the opportunity to maybe go down to the Amazon and sit with an indigenous wisdom keeper, and they find our tools, and this kind of sparks them on this journey of healing and self-inquiry and spiritual practice and connection with nature. And so I'm just kind of thinking and tuning in to these different journeys that people find, and I do feel that one of the ways in which a practice with energy could be really supportive is for someone who wants to go deeper with their connection with plants in their home practice, but might not have the opportunity, maybe time, resources, responsibilities prevent them from going and doing a deep journey or a deep study. So they have access to, maybe it's cacao, maybe it's the hape, maybe it's integrating teas and herbal teas and medicines into their practice. And we do a lot of education about how to speak to plants and how to place intention and how to start to form a relationship. But I'm feeling inspired to open the conversation to how energy and a practice of attuning with one's energy can also be utilized as a resource to deepen one's relationship if they're working with plants in this way. Maybe both of you could just share a little bit of what you might recommend for someone who is perhaps newer to both a spiritual practice and to working with plants, and they're wanting to, honor and get the most out of their experience, as well as deepen their connection, be able to receive all the information, the insights, and how energy could play a role in when we go to sit with one of these medicines and when we go to prepare one of the medicines and integrate it into a spiritual practice. How can we think about energy, whether it be in like what we take, how we prepare ourselves energetically to go and commune, or how can we utilize the energetic field in our meditations when we're in practice with these medicines? I'm very curious to hear what might come through for both of you with this question.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really useful to reflect upon and for us to learn from this recent explosion of interest in plant medicine ceremonies, right? And plant medicine in the Western world is, what is it people are so fervently kind of seeking? Mm-hmm. What is it about the current model that's failing them? And I think a lot of this comes down to this absence in mechanistic Western medicine. And I'm definitely not knocking Western medicine. It has a lot to offer. But this mechanistic parts approach and the importance that more and more we're starting to realize, or I should really say return to, which is holistic, holism, mind, body, spirit. And the fact that what's going on in the body is not separate from what's going on in the mind and the emotions in the psyche. And so when I think about people looking to experience, as you're saying and sharing here, the potencies of the medicine, maybe not in a formal ceremonial context, but maybe using other services, as you said, other products that are facilitating that, sananga, hape, and how they can bring that. It's bringing this holistic model and approach, mind, body, spirit. And really recognizing and connecting when they're sitting, to bring a sense of formality to that for themselves, if there's no space holder, right? If there's not a formal shaman. And that intention, that sense of intention, having an agenda is one way of saying it, but having an intention is another. What is it I'd like to work with? And to set that within the field. And for me, it's really looking at conditioning the space. So how is it that we can hold our own sacred space as our own facilitators to come into our own higher wisdom and knowledge in the context of treating this substance with respect, with harmony, creating a suitable environment in which to participate, be that in the natural world, if that's something that appeals, and that's very nice to bring in the elements. If it's your bedroom, right, or your kitchen, if you're in a small space, how is it you can condition the space to have what you require around you? And then turning inward to the inner landscape, recognizing that we have our center. That's probably the most useful thing I could bring to it from a subtle anatomy perspective, the central channel, our center of being. And orientating one's practice, one's engagement with that medicine from that center. What is it that's pulling you out of center? Where are you going? What are the sensations moving through the body? What's this bringing? What's arising in you? What emotional charge? And then learning to welcome that charge, because we're repressing constantly our negative experiences and emotions. And the medicine's inviting us in this instance to welcome it, to see it, to hold it, to bring presence, to bring our meditator's mindset from our center, from a witnessing orientation, and to be able to hold it with compassion and neutrality as best we can. So we're bringing in the meditator's mindset, but we're bringing in that conditioning of the field, of the space, and then watching as best one can. We might call it ESP, extrasensory perception, but tuning the radio dial of our inner sensing to where in the body or the field, if that's available to us, the chakras, maybe the energy node points along the spine, maybe the broader aura, where is it our attention's being drawn and what's happening there? And this is the skill set we teach. So I appreciate it might not come, naturally to people initially, but everybody can learn to hold their center line and to see where they're being pulled and how and why. And that's going to really start to reveal what's happening as the medicine starts to work through and help them deal with and to integrate with what's arising. And I think integration is another key piece there, but I'll let Keith come into answering.
Yeah, just to get big picture on this for a moment, when we have a podcast as well, Mariah, you've been on it, or it was just published recently, but time reference here is not so helpful. We speak to tons of people who are in the world of healing and consciousness transformation, the seeker and the healer, the awakened person, the healed person. And the word that's most common amongst everybody in terms of what's the point of all this is presence. And that's being here and now. And here and now includes your body, and here and now includes the clarity of mind. And the big picture here for everybody, those of you who are listening always, is how do we find freedom from the things that keep us from being present? I mean, that's, how do we find freedom from the things that keep us from being present? And those things that keep us from being present is all the conditioning that we hold on to. The memories, traumas, thoughts, repression, suppression, fragmentation, distortion, energy blocks, dissociation, whatever, psychological terms, shamanic terms, energy healers terms, doesn't matter. They're all talking about the same thing. It's the stuff that keeps us from being here now. And so these different approaches that we all discuss are just about how do I disrupt my system? How do I shake things up so that I can learn to be present despite the fact that things are trying to move? And that's the mechanism in all healing, is how do I stimulate the stuff that's keeping me from being present and yet have a practice that I can be present for the stuff that keeps me from being present, right? So you could work with Hape, you could work with Sananga, and those stimulations push you into a space where it says, hey, can you relax? Can you be present? Can you notice what's arising without being attached to that stuff? If it's uncomfortable, don't identify with being uncomfortable. If it makes you feel nauseous, try and be okay with being nauseous. Let the sensations move through. If it brings up a memory, be present with the memory, but don't identify with the memory. Don't become the memory. Be the presence that is here now. That's the destination. And so plant medicines are very intense in general. And I'm talking about the power plants, right? They're very intense. They're like getting on a rocket ship, right? It is like, whoo, you are going to talk about stimulation. You are unearthing the depths in general. In most experiences, you're going to very deep places. So the challenge is for people being present when there's that much stimulation is basically the greatest test of being present, because we're talking about riding a bucking bronco with a lot of these medicines, and that's great. So the opportunity is great, but the challenge is also great. And then you can scale it all the way down to things like working with things that are like easier to process and to be present with, and learning to build up the muscle. It's like a muscle building, where you can be present with easier things to be present with, so that when things get stronger and stronger and stronger, whether they be formatted like a plant medicine experience or formatted like life just becomes extremely stressful, and how do you deal with it? How do you remain present despite those things? So it's the skill set of building this muscle of presence, and energy healing is a fantastic way to do it. And, you could work with you can work with, let's say, hape, or just let's call it tobacco, physically, but you can also work with it energetically. Like quite literally, you can work with the consciousness and energy and spirit of tobacco without having physical tobacco. And that it is in a certain sense of the yin and yang between something like the physical object, and the imbibing of that object in a particular way, versus a more psycho-spiritual relationship to the object. And energy healing more lives in that space. So what we see is that when people are practicing working in their field, working with the energy healing approach to it, it is a form of exercise, and a very effective form of exercise to enhance presence and to learn in particular. I think the skill set that's really well developed with the people we work with is presence in relation to navigating what is pulling them away from being present. That's like the gym that we're taking people to in the training that we do is, okay, presence, great. Be present in meditation, be present in a ceremony. Great. Everybody's present. It's like, but then what do you do in terms of the skill set you're developing in this form? And what we're spending a lot of time with people doing is bringing in things that, bring stuff up, disturb the presence. And then how do I navigate those things that are trying to create dis-ease in me? So tracking, scanning, sensing, understanding the energy anatomy, understanding how to traverse your field, your body, your psyche in a way that allows things to move and change whilst remaining present. And so that's what came to mind based on that question, related or not.
No, this is beautiful. And I love where this conversation is going, because it really does feel so relevant and applicable to anyone walking a spiritual path, even if they don't have a direct relationship with energy healing per se. It's all of these things are so universal. And we really do always encourage people who are working with plants to develop other modalities. And so having you both on the show, it's a really beautiful invitation to our listeners, for those who feel a call, right, to this particular modality, because there's so many, and I really do feel like when it comes to choosing the modality that you are going to work with, it really has to come from within and be an intuitive feeling. But really, just if you're listening and you're listening to Keith and Christabel speak and share about this, and you're feeling excited and you're feeling like called to learn more about it, it could be a sign that this modality of energy healing will be an incredible complement to your spiritual journey and inquiries. And so it feels very beautiful to be able to highlight this concept and modality on the show, and very relevant in a lot of ways. And I love that. At this time, I feel called to invite Keith to share a little bit about his book, and what is going on with this beautiful project. I know you mentioned before we started recording that it's written and complete, which is very beautiful. And tell us a little bit about that journey and what your message is that you are wanting to get out and share with the world through this book.
Sure. So this is a book that I needed to write because it in part tells my story, and I feel as though to move forward is partly to share the story so I can put it down. Our future plan is basically to write a next book, Christabel and I co-authoring it, that's about the human energy field, and to try and create like a kind of a textbook, if you will, of energy anatomy. But this book's very personal to me. Half of it is a story, so it's part memoir. It's about 50%. And it basically tells my transformational journey and going from discontent in life through meditation, and all the different things that happened along the way. And in particular, a transition wherein I had this very significant opening, and kind of overnight somewhat, even though lots of baby steps along the way, but overnight had a big opening, big awakening, if you will. And I could see the chakras and feel all the meridians, and henceforth was able to see and interact with the human aura in a way that I didn't even know it necessarily existed before it. To be honest, I wasn't necessarily like knowing what to do with that stuff, those words. And the story accompanies explanatory frameworks. So it's an investigation of saying, well, here's the phenomena of what happened to me, and how can we understand this in terms of different traditions in the world that describe the map of the human psyche and the emotions into subtle domains and sometimes esoteric places, etc. And the overarching idea in the book is introducing energy and the human aura as a way of understanding the key missing link, if you will, in our contemporary understanding of the body-mind connection. And I think that that's really a massive thing. A lot of people might not realize as they're hearing this that we don't know what the mind is. It's not a conversation that is, or a question rather, that is in any way determined by our culture, our sciences, nothing. You ask yourself, what is the mind? That is an unanswered question at the moment. Where is the mind is an unanswered question at the moment. It's not something science has figured out. We don't realize that. And it's a really big question. I mean, you have a body, you have a mind. What's the mind part? What is that? And I think investigating the energy field is actually revealing of starting to point us in the direction of an actual answer. And in doing so, it really opens us up to questioning a lot of the presumptions and paradigms we're working within right now. So what I do on the explanatory framework side, which is quite relevant to the shamanic tradition, is looking at all of the major traditions in the world, kind of like east-west, in terms of where they start to get into the more esoteric domains, more into, like, let's say the deeper mappings about how this works and what happens when you go deeper, more advanced, and to see that they're all more or less talking about the same thing. So if you look at, the meditation traditions, you have samadhi. The yogis have samadhi. The Buddhists have jhana. And there are stages of samadhi and jhana. These are these advanced meditation stages. If you really study those things, which is what I was doing the first 5 years I was meditating and trying to develop those and really investigated those, they're very well mapped out. They're very well articulated with particular language. And then when you go to the world of chakras, you'll also see certain language, certain descriptions. Then when you go to shamanic traditions and you look at planes of consciousness, planes of reality, certain language, certain descriptions, these are all talking about the same thing. They're literally one-to-one the same thing. Chakras, planes of consciousness, dimensions, levels of mind, which is samadhi and jhana. These are describing your energy field. They're also describing the psyche. And we can integrate these maps and start to realize that these different wisdom traditions that are all thousands of years old, more or less, or more, are simply describing the same phenomena. And that's the fundamental thrust of the book, is to try and integrate these traditions and show how my own story, being like naive or unassuming, thrust me into one experience after another in which, very innocently, I had experiences, and the way I had to learn to explain those things was to study and research, compare maps, and to overall, over the course of about 10 years, put together this kind of integrated map that at this moment doesn't exist anywhere. I haven't seen this anywhere. And so I feel like it's a really wonderful thing, and a huge opportunity to advance the discourse about cross disciplines and wisdom traditions, and to put that discussion forward. Because last thing I'll say about this, just I really, really feel like part of what we're doing here in the 21st century is integrating the world's cultures, integrating the wisdom traditions of the world with the scientific world. And I don't see a successful version of this century in terms of real progress and real integration unless the meditator and the sage and the healer are sitting down with the physicist and the neurobiologist. They need to be talking to one another, because they together have complementary understandings that will provide an advancement and an enrichment of our understanding of who and what we are.
Hmm. Wow, that's amazing. It's so beautiful and really well articulated and very, very interesting. I'm super excited to read your book when it comes out. And thank you so much for doing that work and putting that to paper. Because what a beautiful study and offering to this greater vision that you referenced at the end there of this cross and intersectionality of all the different pathways merging into one, and the way forward being one of reverence and comprehension of all the different ways that humanity lives and has lived. And I really hold that vision as well. It's really resonant to why I do the work that I do and what Four Visions stands for. So hearing you speak about it gets me very excited that there's so many beautiful, awake people who are doing such good work to further this greater understanding of where we must go as a collective consciousness in, the next 75 years and over the course of our lifetimes. What is the legacy that we want to leave for the next generations? And so it's very, very beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course, my pleasure.
Hey. I would love to learn a little bit more about what you both do in your trainings and what that looks like for someone who comes to work with you, and how both a retreat and a training feels like and looks like, as well as offer you the opportunity to share a little bit more about your upcoming offerings and opportunities to work with you both.
We've put together the training that we wanted to do. Fundamentally, that's been our guideline, our intention throughout Field Dynamics. We have primarily been offering online trainings. We developed an 8-module, in-depth 100-hour training, and that is 8 intensive weekends taking place roughly about 3 weeks apart over 6 months. We include 2 energy system intensives in that, where we really do focus on sitting, but the sitting throughout. There's a really incredible mix of presentation, materials, sort of working models, explaining the how and the why of energy healing, introducing the subtle anatomy. So what it is, what is this subtle anatomy we keep referring to? What is it? How is it mapped through the body? How is it we can learn to engage with it? People work in many ways as a community. It's small groups so that you have care with both of us. And the idea is sort of 12, 15 people come together and participate in group healing sits where we run the energy healing frequencies. They spend time in their own time doing partner trades, so they get the experience throughout from day one of working with other people and developing experiential understanding of what it is to run energy and have energy healing run on them. And the idea is very much, we laugh, but we toyed with the idea of not even calling it energy healing training. What is it to call this a personal development and awakening course, right? Because so much of what we're aiming to do, energy healing, it just happens to be the tool or the mechanism. But fundamentally, it's about, as Keith was sharing, and as I know you do in your work, Mariah, how do we bring more presence, more understanding, more balance and harmony to our systems, to our ways of being, so that we can be most useful in this world, so that we can live our most fulfilled life, so we can help heal those things that have been holding us back, maybe childhood traumas, maybe issues, patterns of behavior, things that keep showing up. How many people have things that keep rhythmically, cyclically showing up in their lives and like causing them problems, and the exterior wrapping may be different, right? Maybe it's one relationship or another. Maybe it's one job with one boss or another job with another boss. But fundamentally, this idea that it's not really about the external packaging and the people and the external circumstances. It's more the underlying charge that keeps reoccurring. So how is it we can engage with these charges? We do talk about other methodologies, and I think we've already stressed, but yes, energy healing is one aspect, but there's parts to that, and that is presence work and the ability to be present with what's arising. So we really bring in the meditator's mindset. Other pieces there to mention, as we have a 10-hour introduction training. So if you want to try us out, get to know us, this is very intimate work, right? We're holding a very sacred space. As practitioners, we recognize people might want to interact directly with us before they commit to that. So we run a 10-hour introduction training, which may be reformatted in the future, but we'll always have some kind of introductory training. And that's a way of just testing things out and seeing if this resonates for you. I mean, you mentioned, Mariah, there's so many modalities, there's so many tools. We don't hold one above the other. Energy healing is just where we've chosen to focus our attention. And if it, resonates for people, well, our intention is to hold a space of integrity, of non-dogma, and to really help hold people in this process, because we're very connected, and it's very important to us, this idea that the healer doesn't heal. It's we have to get out of our own way in our healing process as individuals, but also as practitioners. So it's not Keith healing somebody, Christabel healing somebody. No, it doesn't work like that. We're providing space, and we're holding the presence, and we're providing that like battery pack, if you will, to your own system, to your own, and helping to provide those tools so people can come in and really empower themselves, get their own toolkit with our assistance to then step forward in life and really start to make fundamental shifts, benefit not only them, but all the people around them, people that, people in their families, the people they're interconnecting with, because it's so important that we really start to bring our attention, I think, to this idea that radical responsibility. We can only be responsible for our own stuff, and it's very tempting to project that out onto the world around us and the external world. And, that isn't working out for me. That person's done this, right? But bringing that sense of radical responsibility, self-responsibility, and saying, okay, how can I provide myself with these tools? How can I empower myself to work through these things? So that's a little bit about what we do. And I know Keith will add plenty more.
I think you did a really good job, actually.
Tell us about your upcoming retreats.
Yeah, so we have on the calendar at the moment, we have an EHT 100 starting in February. Maybe this will exist before then, maybe not. We have another EHT 100, which is that longer form training Christabel is talking about. We're going to be doing it for the first time in person. So we originally envisioned the longer training to actually be like a retreat-based, not retreat-based, but a destination-based training, an immersion. It was modeled a little bit off of how so many people do yoga teacher trainings. They just go somewhere for like a month. They go to Costa Rica, they go to Bali, they go to Mexico, whatever. So we basically thought, in a month, how can we make that an energy healing experience? And so we originally scheduled the first EHT 100 in Bali in 2020, and then the world fell apart. And we've been doing everything online ever since. But now we are, for the first time, holding it in person in Bali. And that's happening mid-April through mid-May of this year, of 2024. And then about 3 weeks after the end of that, we're having a retreat in Bali as well. And retreats differentiate themselves from the trainings in that the training is about walking away with a major skill set and going through the transformational process of learning those tools, integrating those tools. And it's a really comprehensive skill development and experiential healing program. The retreats that we've done, like we did last year in Mexico and this year in Bali, retreats are more about, let's say, community, experience, fun, and healing, but it's not a skill development as the first and foremost thing. It's more about experience and cultural immersion and having a great time and just having a wonderful experience regardless. So we are having a retreat in Bali as well. And there's so much that the Bali culture and has to offer. Christabel and I did live there. The birth canal of field dynamics is Bali in some way, we spent the first year and a half of launching the site, creating all the content, and starting to develop all the training materials and everything over the course of a year and a half or so, really concretizing things while we were living in Bali in 2018 and 2019. And so we're really excited to go back there and do all of that. No, I'm thinking of Bali at the moment. I can't help it. I think, yeah. And the people who come to the trainings are really from every background you could possibly imagine. And that's important to mention. Some people say, is this, a teacher training? Some people say, is this, for me to focus on healing other people professionally? And it's not a teacher training. It isn't necessarily for working on others. It's fundamentally a self-healing process and course that 100% converts into doing this professionally and working with others. So we have our 100-hour course, and then we have an advanced 200-hour course, which is another 6 months. And that's where we offer certification. And generally speaking, people who do that are spending about a year and a half studying with us. And we see really major changes in people in a year and a half of study. We give people plenty to do. We keep them busy, and these tools work. So things change. And it's a really wonderful ride and experience for everybody. I mean, we're honored, we're really blessed to be able to do this kind of work. And as Christabel said, a lot of people don't realize, Christabel and I we studied all different kinds of modalities. I was a modality freak for a number of years. I mean, I studied so many things. It is absurd. And most of the interactions I had in the trainings were cold. There wasn't a personal component to it. It was like show up, learn a skill, and leave. And yes, healing happened. Yes, skill development happened. But most of the time, it wasn't very community-based. And there wasn't a personal connection where the teacher was invested in me and personalized to me. And Christabel and I always felt when we did have those connections with teachers and communities that felt heart-centered, soul-connected, that we got so much more out of it. And that's what our courses are. That's the basis of them. Is not only is there a real depth of quality of education and experience, but it's based in this deeper connection, this recognition of why we're doing this work, and having that open-heartedness, having that soul connection, maintaining that vulnerability and safety, so those kinds of deep changes can take place, and to have that kind of very well-rounded experience, very well-rounded.
I love that. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm excited to get to present these beautiful offerings to our community and our listeners. So we'll definitely include the links to the upcoming retreat and training, as well as your main site for those who feel called to learn more about you both and work with you. And I just really want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and sharing all of your beautiful knowledge and your passion. And I want to wish you many blessings in the work that you're doing in the world, and really give a lot of honor to the sacredness and the dedication behind what is fueling your collective vision and mission through the work that you're doing. So thank you so much, and many, many blessings to you both.
Many thanks, Mariah. It's been an absolute pleasure. And, we very much value and appreciate the work that you do as well. So it's just been fantastic to connect in this way. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mariah. I could feel a real kinship with what we're doing and what Four Visions is doing. And just thank you so much for having us on, and appreciate the connection very dearly.
On behalf of the Four Visions family, we want to thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope you have enjoyed this conversation and have gained seeds of wisdom that will nourish your spiritual path. If you have a moment, please leave us a review, as this helps us to reach more people. For more resources and information about the plant path, and for the highest quality spiritual tools and botanicals, please visit us at fourvisions.com. We are grateful for your support and look forward to continuing this journey with you all. Until next time.